Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January edition of the Conversion Show. My name's Justin Rondo, and I have a treat for you today. I have an e-commerce whiz. E-commerce whiz. I almost said wizard, which would just sound really weird because he doesn't have a beard. But a good friend of mine, and just all around go-to guy for everything e-commerce, for me at least, for the call. And he's going to be talking about the 5 e-commerce tricks you need to know now. And so this is Mike Backo from Cleverbridge. Mike, I'm just going to hand it over to you and take it away. We have 30 minutes to get this stuff done.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Justin. And that's right, I am not a wizard, as far as I know, at least. But thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join the presentation today. I'll be talking to you about 5 e-commerce tricks that your shopping cart needs now. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been in the e-commerce industry for over 8 years. I work for a company called Cleverbridge that processes orders for digital goods and services, and we're processing over 1 million transactions a month, which is great because it gives us a lot of data to work with. And what I'll be sharing with you today is some best practices that we've learned from all of those years of getting data from international transactions. So let's just get right to it. Tip number 1. Make sure your visitors see your cart. Now, this might seem really basic, but believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff that people are throwing up before that shopping cart to prevent visitors from reaching it. So just to give you an example, when a customer clicks this button, buy now, your customer has shown interest in your product. So the question I ask is, why does buy now mean create an account? The customer is excited to buy, and then all of a sudden you're asking the customer to create a username and a password with a certain amount of characters in it. We've all been frustrated by this screen in the past. So do not put it in front of your buy button. This is a conversion killer. Does buy now mean tell me where you're coming from? Define a currency or a region. You should have this information already about your customer. It's another bounce point. It might have your customer consider going to a different product, or pay with a currency that's not meant for their region. I don't know why on earth anyone would pay the €15.95 price for this product. We've also seen buy now mean an interstitial upsell, offering the customer a product other than the one he or she originally selected. Now, this one might make sense for you to use at some point in time, but it requires some thorough testing, and I'm sure other great presentations from Justin could talk to you about that. But it is a bounce point. Now, what it boils down to is buy now means that they want to trade money for your product. So get everything that I've listed out of the way and make sure that the customer can reach that shopping cart when he or she is interested to buy. So I'm just going to cheat and throw in an additional tip in here. So tip 1.5, now assuming the customer has navigated past all those barriers, or hopefully you removed them, make sure your shopping cart looks like your website. There's so many carts out there today that create a disconnect effect where the customer is completely embedded in the experience of the website, and then all of a sudden the customer reaches the shopping cart and doesn't look anything like the page that preceded it. So make sure your shopping cart is styled to look like the site. All right, so let's move on to tip number 2. Now, before we reach that tip, I just want to remind you that there's a ton of information available about your visitors before your cart actually gets built. So you need to use that information to create a more elegant shopping experience. So number 1, or tip number 2, but use that information to make sure you display the right language for your visitors. Now it looks like there might be an audio issue. Justin, are we okay to move forward, or?
That's what I'm checking right now. We have one person in the show today that's having trouble with audio. Is everybody else able to hear? Can you go to chat and let me know if you can't hear right now? Okay. He seems to still be having that issue. Can anybody else verify if they hear anything? Actually, if no one can hear. Okay. So we have other people saying they can hear.
Okay.
Dave, are you using a headset? Maybe the headset itself might be broken? I don't know. Might want to try a different headset or something else there. I don't know how I can help you here.
Okay.
that.
Sorry, Dave. Should I continue, Justin?
Yeah, just continue, Dave. There will be a recording of this that you can watch, and you'll be able to hear it there. So I don't want you to waste your time kind of breaking through some things and then uh, not be able to hear the entire presentation. So there will be a recording though.
All right. Um, okay, great. And I'm seeing in the chat that other folks can hear, so I'll go ahead and continue. So tip number 2, make sure you display the right language for your visitor. Now, a lot of people in the past, and still today that I've seen, have used GeoIP data to pre-select the language for the visitor. So in other words, if somebody's IP address is showing he or she is coming from Germany, show the shopping cart in German. Now, the I don't think that's actually the best practice there. There's a more elegant way to handle language selection, and it's great for travelers. It's great for areas with multilingual locales like Canada or Switzerland where there's 3 languages spoken, and that's really to utilize browser data to determine which language the customer or the visitor has configured his or her browser to, and then match your website based upon that data. It becomes a lot more personal, and it's you're no longer just setting a block rule for an entire geography. So we find that this converts a whole lot better. Tip number 3, show the appropriate input fields. So what I'm going to show you right now is what not to do. This is a live shopping cart that I've seen online. There's a lot going on here. And since some people are participating in the chat, let's try this. Just for the next 5 to 10 seconds, feel free to type into the chat what you think is wrong with these fields. Let's see if maybe somebody will go for it.
Yeah, we'll see if anybody bites on this one. I think me talking actually displayed my face, so you might want to talk again, Mike.
Okay. All right, so I'll just go ahead. So there's a lot wrong with this cart. For starters, the country field is not pre-selected, and why is it at the top? That's just odd placement. There's enough data out there to pre-select this information. State isn't pre-selected. In the United States, the data for this field is very accurate. You should be able to pre-select that. But in a lot of territories, this field isn't even required, so you shouldn't put the burden on the visitor to tell you that. Zip code field placement, this might be correct. It might not be correct, depending on where the customer is coming from, and we'll get more into that in just a few minutes. And then phone number. The fact that phone number here is required is a huge invasion of privacy. This customer is just trying to buy a digital product. Why are you asking and requiring the customer give the phone number? And then, of course, that password field. You're not even telling me what it's for. So there's a lot of unnecessary stuff going on in the shopping cart, and it will cause people to bounce out. It will cause frustrations, and if you have this today and get rid of it, you will see an increase in conversion rates.
So, Mike, I have a question for you, actually.
Yeah.
With the password, and I know a lot of people will add password into billing information so that they can turn that into a created account on their site. How would you say what would you say people should do there if they do have a password in there? Just inform them what it's for, or maybe bring it up at a different time, or what do you think is the best practice?
Exactly. So the best practice is to get it. The best practice is number 1 to ask yourself if you really need that password, right? So if you're selling a perpetual licensed product, or if you're selling tennis shoes, or something that a customer doesn't have to actively log into to use, you probably don't need a password in the checkout process, or you don't need a password at all. An account is not required. If you're selling a service that is account-based, so a customer like Netflix needs to log in with a username and password to access whatever you're selling, then it is an important component of whatever it is that you're offering. Then the question becomes, where does this step have to take place? I would suggest putting it into a trial step, so when the customer is not ready to give up money, or if the customer hasn't created a trial account, or if it just doesn't make sense with your workflow, auto-create a password for your visitor. So in other words, eliminate this field from the checkout process itself. On the confirmation page, show the customer a temporary password with a username that could be his email address, for example, and a link to then customize that password to whatever he or she deems fit. The benefit there is you're putting that step after you've successfully collected the money and you've converted the visitor to a paid user. Good question. All right, so let's move on. So when it comes to the input fields themselves and a couple of other things that I'll be talking about, it really boils down to GeoIP technology. It's out there, they're inexpensive. I believe there might even be some free services out there, but there's no reason not to know where your customers are coming from and then to use that information to your benefit by customizing that checkout process. So that leads me to tip number 4. Show currency, price, and tax and VAT properly. So there's definitely some regional differences that take place, and you need to account for those differences to create a checkout process that converts. So for starters, I'd like to put up this chart, and what this is a representation of passport penetration in different countries. So what this is showing is that 72% of people in the United States do not have a passport. Do not expect Americans to understand what a euro price is or a price that's displayed in a euro standard. It just doesn't compute for Americans. Similarly, I mean, if you take a look at Germany or Japan, you shouldn't assume that someone in Japan will understand what a US dollar price is or a euro price is, or for a German to know the conversion rate to Japanese yen. So currency matching is important. So number 1, use GeoIP routing to display the appropriate currency. Next, and I'll just talk about 2 main regions here, and if you're interested in any other locales, and it looks like we might have some time at the end of this, you can let me know through the chat or contact Justin or myself later on, and we could get specific beyond these 2 regions. But let's just talk about United States visitors for starters. So prices are usually displayed like this. So $ first, followed by the dollars, followed by a period to separate the dollars and the cents. Our prices do not include tax, so there's an expectation for this value to go up after tax is added. And opt-outs are not a big deal. So if you want to add a couple of items to the checkout process, Americans have been culturally conditioned to be upsold like that. It's not going to break the deal. So here's an example of how to properly display a checkout process or the currency itself, the shopping cart, to an American audience. Now, there's actually a real-life example, and I got Justin's blessing to show this before the fact of how this could be confusing. So if I load up Marketizator's website, and it's a good-looking site. If we scroll down, they have this slide bar here, which tells you what your earning estimates can be. Now, I'm sitting here in Chicago, in the United States. On first blush, when I look at this, I was like, wait a minute, my earnings are $39.60. No, they're not. They're actually $39,000. But the problem here is, to an American, as soon as we see that period, that says dollars end here, cents start after. So that's a huge distinction. Now, for a European, it's going to be a little bit different. In Europe, the comma is used to separate the euros from the euro cents. So a period would be used the way that Americans use the comma. So that's why I could tell the Marketizator site was likely made by Europeans. Marketable prices should include VAT. So in other words, when you go to a store and you see something for €9.99, that's the price you paid the clerk. There's no VAT added on top. It's already inclusive. And then the euro symbol itself should be placed after the value in non-English speaking EU territories. So that's just a great way to make customers feel comfortable in the checkout process. They'll see the price. They won't think twice about it. It'll be like a day-to-day activity. You don't ever want to throw the customer off and make him or her feel confused because all of a sudden they're not thinking about buying the product anymore. Now, the last point here is opt-outs are a big deal to Europeans compared to Americans. When they see that price of $99.99, that's the price they expect to pay. So if you're adding in products that increase that value, you might actually be doing yourself a disservice because it could leave the customer with some bad feelings after the transaction. They could feel cheated. So be more careful with opt-out deals in Europe. So here's the example of how that cart should look like for a European customer. As you can see, we have that comma separation between the euros and the euro cents, the appropriate placement of the euro symbol, and this is a VAT inclusive price.
So, Mike, I have a question for you.
Yep.
In the cart, I see there you have and so this is a little different than just how price layout would look. And I'm actually wondering if you have any geo-region insights into this. But when it comes to having promo codes, I see that there's a promo code section in there,
Yep.
in the example you gave. And so, what would you say if you've noticed any trends with the use of promo codes or how to implement them, maybe overall, or if you have any geo-region insights, that'd be cool to hear.
So I do have some information about that. I'd say in general, avoid making this box prominent. Everybody knows that that seeing this box can cause visitors to bounce out of an order process, start a Google search for some sort of discount code. So only show this box when there actually is a live and active promotion. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice because you might lose traffic. I know that for a fact in Japan, promotions are a big deal. So there's different events that take place, different holidays, or reasons to give a promotion that take place every couple of months. So what we find is our clients and other companies around the world leverage timing promotions and coupon codes to those holidays and then hit their email list with those codes, because then you get the feeling that you're getting a discount. You know, you're more likely to convert. But generally speaking, I'd say don't overdo it. Don't oversaturate your customer base with discounts. You're going to tell them that you're going to devalue your product. You're going to tell them to wait for that discount. And I'd generally say hide this field unless you have a good reason to show it that day.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some interesting things as well, and I was curious if your kind of your data lined up with mine. And I had seen things similar, but I've also seen some interesting tests where they've taken the promo area and say after a failed attempt, they show them the active promo codes that exist rather than having to pay an affiliate if they do a Google search, like it just hits up Retail Me Not or something like that, where people actually try to make it very clear that there is a promotion. These are the codes. We don't want to frustrate you anymore. Just we want your money essentially, and we don't want to have to pay out extra things or lose more money on this sale by affiliate codes coming through, or you just abandoning the cart.
Yep, I've seen that as well. What I haven't seen is any concrete data to tell me whether that helps or whether it devalues whatever it is you're selling. So I'd be interested to learn more about that, but I personally don't have anything concrete to add to that.
Yeah, I've only seen one split test like that where it actually did increase sales and actually their basket value as well, where people had hit minimums for minimums for different percentages off. So I've only seen it in one instance, so I can't say it's an across the board piece, but I'm actually going to try and dig out some more of those and find some more information from that, or even run those tests myself.
Yeah, that could be really cool to find out. All right, let's see. Moving on. Tip number 5: show the right payment methods, and more importantly, hide the ones that don't matter. So there's a whole lot of payment methods out there in the world. Most of these don't matter. So I just don't have the time right now to go through all the regions of the world and talk to you about what we see as being the appropriate payment methods for different territories. But what I'll do is show you a couple of case studies of how we're presenting payment methods and the logic that went behind that. And then there is information out there, and I'd be happy to answer specific questions as they come up. But the key is not to overload your customers with options. Know where your customer is coming from based on that GeoIP information, and then intelligently show the payment methods, just a few that are really the most popular for that region, and then hide the rest. So to give you an example, the United States, it's really all about credit card and PayPal when it comes to digital goods. So if you're not offering PayPal today, you're missing out. You need to get that contract and start transacting in PayPal. In Germany, it's a bit different. We see about maybe half of 50% of transactions running through credit card, but then we see, or maybe even less than 50, and then we see the lion's share being done through direct debit type purchases or a wire transfer, or PayPal being used as a debit service. So the big distinction there is if you're not offering a direct debit or a wire transfer option to your German visitors, you're missing out, because there isn't the same usage of credit cards in Germany as there is in the United States. Similarly, in the Netherlands, they take it a step further. Ideal is a Dutch-specific bank transfer. Now, there's a ton of banks that fall into this, but offering Ideal as a payment method in the Netherlands can make or break you for that territory. There's some customers that will only transact in that for that space. And I don't think I have it listed in this presentation, but I'll just verbally tell everyone about Japan and the konbini phenomena that happens there, which I think is really interesting. So in Japan, there's a hesitation to transact with credit cards, but there's a huge popularity of a payment method known as konbini. And konbinis are basically a series of different convenience stores all around Japan that allow the customer to, when buying an online product, to print out a physical voucher, go to their local convenience store, hand that voucher to the clerk scans it, and then hand that clerk cash for whatever that voucher is. Then that scanning of the voucher and the paying of the cash to the clerk initiates a digital fulfillment process. When that now customer goes back home, his or her digital good is there waiting for him, but this person decided to physically go to a store and pay for it. And that's hugely popular in Japan. So the point here is you need to figure out where your customers are coming from and then figure out what the right payment methods are for those individual territories and make sure you offer them. Otherwise, you will be missing out. So before I run through the summary, I guess, Justin, any questions that you're coming up with or anything else that I should touch on?
I'm actually at this point, I just want to let people know, if you have any questions, please start typing them into the chat, and I'll start reading them off to Mike. But actually, I was curious, do you have any insights as to why that phenomenon in Japan is so prominent?
Sure. So I'm not the complete authority on this, but it has to do with the credit crisis and the currency crisis that they suffered years and years and years ago. Basically, culturally they shifted away from putting things on credit. It could have to do with just interest rates in general, and it's more of I'm going to spend the money that I have. And I might be distrustful of putting a credit card number into a website, or I'd rather do this as cash on hand. Furthermore, there's also a high rate of paying for your utilities through the konbinis as well. So it's not just for digital goods, but this has culturally become a way just to pay for your day-to-day expenses.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. I was just thinking we always talk about, you gotta decrease the number of steps and do all these things, where it sounds like there's all these extra steps that go in with that. It just kind of blows my mind from a digital perspective, because it seems antithetical to what we kind of preach. But yeah, very, very cool. I had one more question, and I believe really I started touching upon it when I was talking about creating accounts, and you started getting into like when it was appropriate. But I know you and I are on the same page with our love for guest checkout and hate for sites that don't have guest checkout. Is there anything you want to touch upon there to kind of make clear if there's anybody in the audience who is a staunch, need to have an account in order to check out type person, and maybe persuade them otherwise?
Test it. I mean, let me put it this way. I take it a step further. I hate even offering the guest checkout option. I think everyone's a guest. I think if you know who the customer is already, great. You could pre-fill that checkout process for them, but you don't. That authentication should happen way before the checkout experience takes place. I think that the interstitial step of login or checkout as a guest is another roadblock. It's another opportunity for the customer to bounce out. It's another page to load. It just shouldn't exist in my perfect e-commerce world. Now, that's for products that don't need that account, right? So. Mm-hmm. If you do, then of course there's other factors that come into play. But I think we're at a point now where if you need me, if I truly want to create an account for your product, I will create an account. I shouldn't be forced to if I want to give you money in exchange for your good or your service.
Yeah. All right, and then on top of that, you talked about in the U.S. dealing with like how opt-outs are we expect to be upsold or cross-sold. And I've seen dozens of tests that have to do with kind of the right time to upsell, cross-sell. Where do you find it to be appropriate in your field? I have my opinion, which I'll be happy to share after.
Yep.
from tests I've seen, but I'd like to hear where you're coming from.
So yeah, there isn't a blanket answer that I could give. So it really varies based upon who you're selling to, what kind of product you're offering to, what are the cross-sold items that you're offering, what's the overall price. So I just want to say that a lot of factors come into play. What I've what I've seen some success with is that the after the fact upsell, like on the confirmation email. So you've already successfully transacted on the confirmation email, like, hey, why don't you add that extra year of maintenance for 25% off, right?
Mhm.
Um, I've also done some successful stuff where I put the offer below the checkout box above the form, and I reinforce whatever value it is those cross-sold items are by adding some information to the right sidebar. So, for example, if it's maintenance, I would use that real estate to explain why this maintenance is important for the customer and why they should be opting into it. So I've run a gamut of tests. It's different for every single product category and customer group. So I hesitate to say don't do this ever or do this always. It really boils down to a testing answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I guess the one safe bet is if you always put it on the confirmation page, then at least you've secured the customer already and you're trying to monetize after the fact.
Yeah, that's a lot of work really well. Have to deal with trying to monetize after the fact. Get them in for that offer that they came there for, and try to squeeze some more money out of them on that confirmation page. But you're right. It really does come down to test it, and it really does break down to what industry you're in. In fact, I was writing an article about an argument for cross sells or upsells on thank you pages, and some of the research I was doing, I was going through people's checkout process. And if you've ever gone to Dell's checkout process, they don't like to cross sell in the cart at all, but they will hit you up with 3 cross sells on your way to the cart. So they actually increase the number of steps to get there, which I think is a kind of a mistake because you have to make people jump through a lot of hoops. And I can only imagine. I don't know what their European checkout process is like. Actually, I really want to check that out now because I just did it based on their US checkout process. Hopefully, they're practicing what you preach, at least, Mike, that people in the US are used to those interstitial upsells, and hopefully they're not doing that in the EU.
Yeah, it would be interesting to check out. And I think it definitely varies if you're buying a piece of consumer electronics or a digital good. Like if the steps are to assemble a computer
Hmm.
right along the way, then I could see that making sense. But usually the I'd get so frustrated if I get frustrated by one interstitial upsell. If I get hit with more than one, I mean that's insanity to me.
Exactly. I can remember. I always felt like whenever you see those like multiple interstitial upsells, it makes me almost feel like you're on a spammy site. I've gone to some kind of shadier hosting sites that the checkout process becomes extremely elongated because it's just interstitial upsell, and it almost makes you just want to bounce right off, even though they've already sold you, which is kind of a pain.
Yep.
All right. So those are the questions I had. So you can go through your summary and we can close this beast out.
All right. So make sure your visitors can see your cart. Everything that Justin and I were just talking about. So get rid of those interstitials unless you've tested them and you know they work. Get rid of the forced login layer. Guess you could use guest checkout if you want to create that account, but try to avoid it. Make sure your cart looks like your website. Don't confuse the customer with some unbranded checkout process. Tie language to the browser configuration. And make sure that you're localizing if possible. And then when it comes to the input fields themselves, understand that there's a huge difference based upon where a customer is coming from. So for example, in the United States, yes, we collect the state field. In Europe, you do not. And in Europe, the zip code actually goes ahead of the city field. Don't require the phone number, and make sure you're always thinking internationally. Look at your own traffic and find your top 5 regions and make sure you're doing it right for those customer groups. Show currency and tax and VAT in the appropriate way. Don't show Americans a period when they're used to seeing a comma, and vice versa. And make sure that you're offering payment methods that your customers want to transact with, and eliminate ones that are distracting and don't matter. With that, that's five easy tips right there that hopefully everyone can use today to increase their conversion rates. my contact details are available through the website, I guess, or you could reach me on the publicized Twitter or at batco@cleverbridge.com. At this point, I just want to check and see if anyone else has any questions out there before we wrap this thing up.
All right, we'll give people about 5, 10 seconds to write something in there. If not, we'll let them be on their merry way. All right. Thank you so much, Mike, for taking the time out of your day to give us these 5 tricks for carts. And thanks everybody for coming to visit and spend some time with us today. I know everybody's really busy, and I look forward to seeing everybody else next month in February's edition of the Conversion Show.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Justin.